I think somebody might be lost. I'm going to go ahead and read the comments and then we're going to get into it. Shall we? Let's go. Don't say nobody walks away from loving parents. Sometimes the kid gets all he can and appreciate nothing, so they blackball the parents. Oh, Pamela, 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 Pamela. You said he. Could it be that your son has walked away from you? And let me guess, he was ungrateful and he sucked you dry and now you're off his guest list. I have to think that because of the way that you worded what you worded. And by the way, don't tell me what to say on my own page, on my own platform. You don't have to be here. You could just scroll on by, Butterfly. But since you decided to make a comment, I'm deciding that I'm going to address you because in one way, you're not completely wrong. And it's okay. We don't have to agree on things and all this and that. You can make comments. I don't have a problem with that. I didn't actually find your comment disrespectful. I just want to remind you that you're a guest here. This is my platform and this is our community. And in our community, we meet one another with respect and kindness. All that to be said, of course, not 100% of children who go no contact because of abuse or trauma or a lack of love. There's mental health issues that take up a small percentage. So I'm going to go ahead and just give you a percentage as it relates to children who run away from home. Since people like to think that kids who are running away from home, basically going no contact with their parents in childhood before they're really equipped to, are like ungrateful and rebellious and all of that sort of thing. You know, screaming for attention, and that part's correct. They are screaming for attention, for rescue. And all that to say, there is a percentage of children that run away from home because there's a mental health issue. So statistically, around 8% of children who run are children who have mental health issues. Maybe they have bipolar, maybe schizophrenia, different mental illnesses that are not necessarily caused by environmental factors. So you're right. And in those cases, their parents might be the most loving humans on the planet. And unfortunately, their child, and this goes on into adulthood, doesn't want to maybe accept their diagnosis, doesn't want to get the help that they need. Maybe they refuse to take medication. It's complicated. Around 80%, 85% of children who run away from home are running from emotional, sexual, I gotta be careful how I say the word, and or physical abuse. Some have one, some two, some three. I was a triple header. I ended up living on the streets at the age of 13. And over 65% of those kids come from homes where there is a lot of money. Middle to upper class kind of homes. And there's a reason for that. A lot of those children get ignored because everything looks good on the outside. Nobody can believe there's abuse happening on the inside. And if you look at like these stupid family vloggers out there, these so-called parents, the way that they're running things looks one way, right? In terms of what the house looks like. What's her name? Frankie is a perfect example of that. Beautiful home, right? Abusing her children right in front of the camera for all of us to see, and social services is being called and the kids aren't getting rescued. And that's because of the impression that finance leaves behind. So 8%, 80, 85%, that doesn't take up 100%, right? I'm not a mathematician, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that doesn't add up to 100%. A lot of the kids also, outside of the 65%, have and actually even inside the 65%, have been in some sort of situation where they've been a part of the system, meaning they've been in some sort of foster care or group home, something like that. And kids often run from those homes. Again, likely because there's some sort of abuse going on, or they're trying to run back to their parents even though the parents were the abusers, because that bond is so primal. And then there's a portion of the kids who are maybe have had some sort of abuse, not in the household, but it's not being handled, like they're not being brought into therapy, they're not being helped, they're not being supported. Maybe they're not disclosing and the family doesn't know how to deal with them. So there's other reasons. Also, the LGBTQ kids who come out and the parents kick them out. So when we're talking about runaways or homeless youth, I don't want to overlook that, because that's actually a huge portion as well. All this to be said, the most unbreakable bond there is in this world is that of a mother and a child. Our mothers are our first loves. We are in utero, in protection, in the warm and fuzzy place where if that mother is going to be abusive, they can't do it there. Well, maybe they can with drugs and things like that, but for the most part, I don't want to go absolutes. For the most part, in most of these in utero situations, a child is forming a bond. I mean, we're DNA, cells, the whole 9 yards. Their first heartbeat that they hear is that of their mother. The first voice they hear is that of their mother. And their father probably, because if daddy's talking to the tummy and all that good stuff. But the first and most consistent. Do you get where I'm going with this? So you come out into the world and you're like, oh my God, you're my everything. And when you have a mother look down at a child and go, yeah, but you're my nothing. Because I think that's what it has to be in order to intentionally abuse a child. And then that same mother goes, you should be grateful I gave you food, I brought you into the world. Kind of sounding like your comment a little. And that child goes, no contact. Well, that's what that mother is telling themselves, but the child knows the truth. Eventually we grow up and we figure out, hopefully, that there was nothing wrong with us and that our parent was messed up. I do want to acknowledge that I am very well aware that there are adult kids who go no contact because of issues that are created maybe from the other parent. Especially if you're a parent out there and you're emotionally immature, or you were raised by somebody who's narcissistic, grew up underneath somebody who is narcissistic, and you do the love by marrying, and as doing the love you marry someone who's just like that abusive parent. You've recreated that dynamic and you're passing down trauma, and a lot of times there are estrangements in those situations. If you're that kind of parent and that's happened to you, and you go and you end up getting help and you start healing yourself and working to become more emotionally in touch and mature, and your child comes back, you have a really good chance of repairing that relationship. Pamela, on the other hand, based on how you worded this, you're looking for some sort of gratitude, I think, from your child. Or maybe you raised them in a way that created someone who's very entitled. Children don't raise themselves, and so when they estrange in adulthood, the people who raise them have the responsibility of that because they created the foundation. And that doesn't always mean that the foundation didn't have love. It does always mean, however, that somewhere in the foundation something went wrong, other than, mental health, which, genetics and things like that. So I'm talking outside of that because I have a feeling you're going to take things a little bit literally. I myself have had experiences with my own children. So I have 3 adult children, ranging between the ages of 33 and 41. I had my first child when I was 17 years old, my first little pancake. And unfortunately for her, she got the most immature version of me. She got the version of me that was walking around with a lot of unresolved trauma, and I didn't go to therapy for 9 years. My mother destroyed my ability to trust a therapist when I was 17. She brought me to therapy and then told me, oh, the therapist tells me everything and you need to stop talking about me and that sort of thing. I went to exactly 2 sessions. And my mother told me because she was paying the therapist that she was going to report back to her. And even though the therapist had told me that that wasn't a thing in the very first meeting, my mother gaslit me, and whatever my mother told me, I believed, because that's what I knew to do. That's how my mother conditioned me throughout my childhood. In the first session, as a matter of fact, she sat there and trashed me for about, I'd say the first 15 minutes, what seemed like an eternity, to the therapist. And now she leaves the room, and I'm supposed to open up when I know the therapist now knows I'm a tramp and damaged goods. So it took me a really long time, and the support of my ex-husband, who actually really grew me up, we're 13 years apart, to go into therapy and become a better version of me. It's been a long process. There's modeled behaviors that I have demonstrated for my children that were really unhealthy, like the way I handled food and money and things like that. I fed them really well. The way I treated my own body is what I mean. And so at different points in time in their adulthood, they have either estranged with me or been quiet with me for periods of time and things like that. My youngest told me the other day, no, mommy, I was never like no contact with you. I just assumed when she was quiet with me, she had some things that she was working through, and maybe she was angry at me. She knew the door was open, and all my kids have always known that. All my children have always said, at one point in time or another, that they knew that they were loved by me and their father every single day of their life. That's the foundation that we laid. When my eldest daughter, oh, and fun fact, my eldest daughter, I went no contact with my mother like 30 something years ago. My eldest knew her for on and off the first 6 years of her life. So my eldest ended up in a relationship with her in her adulthood. And when I say adulthood, I should probably do this because she was around 18 or 19 when she made contact with my mother, trying to have a relationship with my own grandmother, actually, she didn't know at the time all the history of my grandmother and everything that had gone on. Anywhoosie, my mother would like tell her how ungrateful and spoiled I was. Yeah. She didn't share with her, how she dropped me out of a 2-story window trying to unalive me when I was 5 or 6 years old. She didn't share with her how she exposed, my own daughter to like R-rated movies and things like that. And my daughter has memory of them now, but at 18, 19, she wasn't thinking about things that way. Now at 41, she looks back and she's like horrified, right? So my mother didn't share anything outside of me being grateful and spoiled and rebellious and hard to handle. Didn't share with her I was pretty much a almost straight A student. I would say A, maybe mostly A's and a B here and there. Never got in trouble in school. Never shared any of that. Nothing. My eldest ended up going no contact with her, and that's pretty permanent because my mother eventually, the mask fell, and it didn't slip, it fell. It shattered on the ground, and my eldest decided that she didn't want a relationship with her and really doesn't have much of one with that side of the family. And if she chose to, that's perfectly fine too. I respect her decisions. Imagine that, a mother who respects their children's decisions. I don't have to like it. I don't have to agree with it. I'm not living her life. She is. I grew her up to be an independent person who could make her own decisions. So all this to be said, I have a personal understanding of how sometimes children estrange because maybe they're just, growing through life like my youngest daughter did and needed a little bit more independence or autonomy, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes they estrange because we pass down trauma and we don't give them the stable environments that they deserved. Particularly with my eldest daughter, that was the case. She got the worst version of me. Love, but sometimes love is not enough. When my children came to me after the estrangements, well, not my youngest, but after the estrangements, and opened up and talked to me about, you know, what was going on and why they needed space and all this and that, and looking for, you know, validation and understanding. That's what they got. They got, I'm sorry I hurt you. I don't have to remember the situations that they brought up the way that they do. All I have to know is that's how they experienced them. And I was the mom, and it was my job. I am the mom. It is my job to do better. Doesn't matter that I was abused and I went through all the things that I did. It wasn't anybody else's responsibility but my own to seek, you know, being emotionally healthy, to seek services and the things that I would need to be a better mom. And in every world, we're never going to be perfect. This isn't that. It costs nothing to say, I'm sorry I hurt you. It costs nothing. It costs nothing to say, how can I do better? How can I support you better? Not only does it cost nothing, but it pays in dividends. It pays, like, the return on that is infinite in terms of my own personal self-growth, hearing the things that hurt them and understanding that, okay, I can take responsibility for that. That doesn't make me a bad person. Actually, taking responsibility makes me a good person and a good mom. And the things that they don't want me to do again, maybe I'm developing skills through that to go, oh yeah, that was pretty insensitive. Okay, I'm going to work on that behavior. There's only a payoff. And the biggest payoff of all of it is that you become closer to your children and that relationship becomes stronger. And now where we are all these years later, and I think it's because I didn't blame my past trauma on my bad decisions. I don't know, but I kind of think that's a part of it. I didn't look for my children to comfort me. I didn't make it about me. Now, all this time later, there are times where we're having conversations about, you know, things I did when they were children, good, bad, in between, whatever, things they did and stuff like that. And I have heard my children say, yeah, but mom, you know, now I understand, given where you came from, how much you actually did break the cycle and how much that must have really sucked to have that childhood. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I've written a book and they've read it and they really know a lot more detail than they did when they were growing up. I never sought that out in them. I never expected it. I'm really proud of the fact that I've raised children who have that kind of empathy and compassion, and that I get to be the recipient of it now. It is a beautiful full circle moment. All this to be said, I hope you actually learned something from what I'm sharing here today. If nothing else, that you learn that I'm not, you know, standing on a hill and staking a claim that every single child who estranges, who goes no contact, is because, you know, of abuse from the parent. I will die on the hill of the majority of children who go no contact. It's because there was something wrong throughout their childhood where they didn't feel loved, cared for. I call it safe, seen, and cherished enough to be able to be in a relationship with their parent. And that there's a likelihood that in their adulthood, the relationship was fractured and the parent wasn't seeing them as adults and respecting them as adults, kind of thing. So anyway, as another side note, I know lots of side notes here. You do realize that you are on a platform for adult survivors of narcissistic abuse, right? So when I speak about something, I am coming at it from that angle. I'm not here to address necessarily the parents who've passed down trauma, although sometimes I do that, because I know that there's parents out there who are getting really bad bonding and advice from estranged parents who sound a lot like you. And it saddens me to know that those relationships that are repairable may not be repairable as a result of that. We need to do better for ourselves, and a byproduct of that is then we can do better for the people we're in relationships with, like our children, or hopefully our children. Anywho, see, I hope you have a wonderful day. No shade. I know I was a little snark. Don't tell me what to do. But at the end of the day, you know, you are where you are. I am where I am. And I just kind of hope that you get something good from this, because it sounds like you have a son who's no contact. And if you're feeling like he's abandoned you because he's ungrateful, you might want to kind of dig a little bit deeper. You know, maybe go to therapy. I wish you well.